Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm reviewing Child's Play 2019. This is a remake of the original film. This was directed by Les Clevberg and stars Aubrey Plaza, Brian Tree Henry and Mark Hamill as the voice of Chucky. This is ultimately a contemporary reimagining of the 1988 horror classic film. Child's Play follows Karen, a single mother who gifts her son Andy a buddy doll, unaware of its more sinister nature. This sort of tries to do something different with Chucky, different ideas involving technology, and his ability to kill people, I guess, in a kind of a different way. Look, ultimately, I didn't like this film. I thought it was terribly done. It was uninspired. I didn't really get a lot from this film, and I just felt it was unnecessary. It's another example of them taking a well-known horror property and trying to remake it because they know audiences will go to it because there's a fan base for the original concept and idea. I just felt this film was soulless. There was nothing really to it. I didn't really like any of the characters. It felt like a slasher film, generic, cliched slasher film. We have a variety of characters, young teenagers usually, that you don't really care if they live or die. And it's usually, with these films, it's usually the death scenes that are inventive and unique and interesting. This film didn't even have those. There wasn't really any interesting or unique death scenes. It was a bit too gory and it just didn't really work for me. Now, before I get into all the things I didn't like about this film, I thought I'd start with some positive. Yes, there are some positives to it that I did like. They aren't many, but there is a handful. One of the things I did like about it is the use of technology and the idea that the Chucky character or Buddy is connected to a network of other toys and technology that this company produces. And I kind of like that, and it's the idea that he can control these things. And that was kind of interesting. They didn't do much with it though. It's sort of wasted, but it was an interesting idea to introduce, I guess. I like that characters could download a particular app and they could see through Chucky's eyes or see through the Buddy doll's eyes, and I kind of thought that was an interesting idea as well. And that was used in certain points and for death scenes, but it ultimately was wasted and wasn't used in a way that could have been inventive and original. And that's what I found with a lot of things in this film. They're interesting ideas, but they never really go anywhere with them. I thought the kid that they had was okay. He did all right. I didn't really care too much about him, but I cared enough, I guess. Brian Tree Henry was solid with the material he had. Look, I'm a big fan of his, and I think up until this film he's made some good choices of particular movies to be involved in. And I just felt he's wasted here. He's quite a humorous guy, but can be quite dramatic and quite intimidating. And I thought they could have really used him in an interesting way. He ultimately takes over from Chris Sarandon, who was a cop in the original film. And look, he does the best he can with what he's got. It sort of reminded me of Idris Elba in Prom Night. Terrible film, but he sort of was a standout. And I feel Brian Tree Henry stood out a little bit. Not as much as Idris did in Prom Night, but just enough that I could kind of like his character. I thought Mark Hamill's voicing of Chucky was quite well done. They could have done more with it. They could have let him have a bit more free range and could have brought in a little bit of the Joker concept that he does from the animated series. And I just feel that could have evolved a little bit. It could have had a laugh, could have had something. Because Brian Dorff in the original film who voiced Chucky, he sort of had a laugh and he brought a lot of life to this particular character. And in this film, they don't give Mark Hamill enough ability to do what he does best, I guess. And I guess the only other thing I really liked about it was the last 10-15 minutes. The third act of the film section I really liked. It wasn't brilliant or fantastic, but it was better than most of the rest of the film. And I just felt that the whole film should have been more like this. It had its sort of Chucky, the original Child Play humour. And it was very inventive and interesting third act of the film, and the sequence was really good. And this sort of made the film bearable, I guess, just for the last 10 minutes. But really, that's all I really liked about the film. I found it was disappointing. Like, I went in there with no expectations and I was still disappointed. Now to the things I didn't like. I thought it was poorly written and there was no inventiveness to it. It was boring, not a lot happened. I thought the design of Chucky was like really weird, creepy, not like the original version of Chucky, which was just creepily strange. This was just a really odd design, and I don't think that really worked. The two things I disliked the most about this film was the concept and idea of why Chucky's doing what he's doing. and how he became this sort of killer. I just didn't like that idea, what they did with that. And it didn't make any sense to the ultimate story. And his motivation for why he wanted to kill Andy or kill people isn't clear or strong in this, and it's kind of a silly concept and idea. In the original film, Chucky's motivation is to transfer his soul into ultimately Andy and become human again. And this was a kind of an interesting motivation for him. This film didn't have any of that. It was just kind of thrown in there, and just the reasoning behind it I didn't think really worked. And a lot of character choices didn't work for me either. But I think the other thing I really disliked is, sorry to all the Aubrey Plaza fans out there, I thought she was terrible in this film. Terribly miscast. Her unique, quirky strangeness just didn't work for this particular role. I didn't buy her as Andy's mother at all. And she had clunky dialogue, and every time she was on the screen I sort of sighed. I just didn't like her in this at all. And I thought she was one of the weakest parts of this film. Like I said previously, it's poorly written, it's terribly written. The dialogue is terrible. There's so many great concepts in there they screw up. They just didn't know what they were doing with this film at all. I felt 90% of the film was just boring and uninventive and unoriginal and just cliched and boring. And I just didn't care for it. And through these 90% of the film, I was going to give this film 0 because I just didn't like it at all. I thought it was a wasted opportunity to do something original and unique. Read this interview thing where Don Mancini, who created the Chucky films, ultimately the character in the Child's Play films as writer and then later on director, he said this film had nothing to do with him. He didn't want his name attached to it all, and I don't blame him. For what they've released here is just horrific. And if they let Don create something unique and original, it could have been interesting, but they didn't. They went in a whole different direction with a different writer who just didn't know what he was doing with the material, I don't think. I was just disappointed really in this film at all. Final verdict. Look, I can't really recommend this to people. I thought this film was terrible. It had small amounts of things that were kind of interesting, but they went nowhere. I just ultimately felt that the writer and director really ignored the source material, didn't understand the character or what made the original film so popular and interesting and fun. They forgot the fun part. This film has stupid humor that doesn't really work. And it's just a weird feeling movie. And Andy's too old. He's way too old. He's like 15, 16, where in the original film he was just a little boy. And that worked so much better, in my opinion. Having him older and having people not believe him that Chucky's killing people is just, it's ludicrously stupid. And I really was disappointed in that. Horror fans won't like this at all. And if there's horror fans out there like cliched, boring, run-of-the-mill horror films, they may like this, but I highly doubt it. This is one of the worst films this year, and I was very, very disappointed. I'm going to give Child's Play 2019 1 out of 5. Just didn't like it, thought it was a waste of time, felt this was one of the most disappointing and crappy films of the year. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.